here we go. What we're talking about, the exclusions are going to be, some of these are very common, and you probably would not be too worried about them. But just for the record, for those of you geographically that are located in earthquake zones, earthquake is always excluded. Now, for those of you in California, where that tends to be earthquakes is, where you will, central, there is an endorsement. It's relatively inexpensive. For those of you that have the earthquake exposure, certainly we will identify that. A true expert will identify that. Even someone who writes in that state should identify that. In my peer group, they better. But then again, a lot of my peer group is fat, lazy, and happy, and they'll let you dictate the tempo, and that's not your job. I don't come to you for law advice and start to tell you how you do your job. But for those of you watching, I'm sure you start laughing like, are you kidding me? Half of the people that come visit me are going to tell me how to defend their case and what have you, versus just I ask them a question, what happened? They start to tell me about something they learned on Law and Order because they saw it on TV, or their brother-in-law. Don't forget the old brother-in-law advice, what have you. Well, that's not a good way to do business, and you, viewing this, should not have to figure out insurance on your own. Your time is worth so much more, and that's my job and why you pay me. So that's the story there. Flood, if you're in a flood zone, New Orleans, for example, around any type of area in the country where you've got flood exposures, those are always excluded too. That's become kind of a disastrous type subject, if you will, because it's now controlled by the government. No, this is not my attempt to beat on the government and what have you. That's zero from it. All that, whenever, I guess where you go with that, a lot of times when government gets involved, you get a touch of a bureaucracy on that. But there are waiting periods. You can't sit around and watch the Weather Channel and then pick up the phone, because flood insurance, for the cost, is pretty expensive. You know, the average premium is going to be about $1,000 a year for something that is a relatively low exposure. But if you are in a flood zone where you know you get flooded, you know, then it's worth it. But you can't say, holy crap, here comes a big storm, I better give Carol a call, insuring lawyer a call. And we get it. There's a 30-day waiting period. Unless you're closing on a new office, then they'll allow it to go immediately. It'd be the same on your residence, too, for whatever that's worth if you live in a flood zone. But that's it. The other exclusions, though, let's get more to things that are very real to law firms. I touched on this earlier. Sexual harassment, unfair termination, and discrimination. And right now, I know the questions are going off in your head. Well, wait a minute. I don't discriminate against anyone. I love people of all, sizes and shapes and ages and colors, ethnicity, religious beliefs, you name it. I'm all in. I'm a good guy. I was raised properly. I'm a good gal. I was raised properly. All these different things. I'm sure you are. I believe that. I think society as a whole has become more like that, which is a great thing. And yet, we're not talking you. We're talking about your staff. We're talking about how your staff could interact with patrons, with your clients, if you will, or we're talking about how your clients can interact with your staff. I'll get into some examples in a minute. So let's start with sexual harassment. Sexual harassment, in the true definition of the word, is what it is. You've got someone who's harassing, and most commonly, here's what you see. It's usually for a firm who has some employees. If you're a solo firm with one employee, a personal assistant, a paralegal, what have you, you're okay. I mean, you are who you are. You're not going to do that. It's your business. You don't poop where you eat, as the saying goes. Let's call it what it is. But at the end of the day, you like those. That's good stuff, my cliches. And I'm keeping it clean today. I'm an old athlete, so locker room language, as my mother used to call it, is well within my arsenal here. But we'll keep it clean. But my point is, get it? You keep it clean. That's fine. But if you've got numerous people that work for you, and you've got a young lawyer, for example, let's stereotype here. You've got a young lawyer. Let's call him the Rainmaker. The guy's out there killing it. I mean, he's phenomenal. This guy is a superstar in the making. He's mentoring under you. He someday may be targeted to take your firm over, because if you don't position it that way, he's going to leave you and go be your competitor. So, let's look at that guy. And you've got a couple of paralegals, and they're young ladies they keep in shape, they're attractive, and what have you. And he's just a healthy, red-blooded male. He wants a date with them. And he continues to say, hey, let's go out, let's get a drink, come on, I like you, and this and that. Nothing in a human form is wrong with that. But in an office situation, you say to the young guy, come on, let's call him Joe. Come on, Joe, there's a million fish in the sea, why don't you go fishing elsewhere? But he just walks in, he makes a comment, nice dress today, still ask him out on a date, might bump into them at a sports bar or something. He says something subjective. suggestive, I should say, and then you've got a situation where that employee quits, the paralegal, for example, or you fire her because really she stunk, she wasn't much of an employee, and you're in a situation now where then a week or a month or 2 months later you get a certified letter in the mail that one of your peers is suing your firm for sexual harassment. That's a great example of how that can go on. On the flip side, so you think, well, I don't have a lawyer that's like that, or we're all women in this office and we don't roll like that. That's great, fine. But here's the flip side. You have a client that comes in, and it's he first, again, to stereotype, is an alpha male. He comes in and he starts, throwing it like he's out at a bar, and it's getting to be 1 o'clock in the morning if the bar time to close is 2. He's putting the full court press on. And he says to the young lady, your receptionist, a paralegal, a personal assistant, female lawyer, young junior lawyer, and he comes in and he starts giving her the business. Again, not being horribly offensive, but making people uncomfortable. And this is a guy that pays your firm huge money, okay? What are you going to do at that point there? Are you going to walk out there and scream at the guy and say, shut your mouth and stop acting like that? Or are you going to say, hey, that's just, Jimmy the big shot, he's a good guy, yeah, he's got a wandering eye, he likes women and the whole 9 yards, or whatever. You can't play that off. See, in your office, if that support staff, if they quit, you better believe I've seen these suits. I'm in year 28 of my career. I've seen these suits. They come out of nowhere. If you don't have that protection, which is the term is EPLI, the acronym I should say, EPLI, standing for Employers Practice Liability Insurance. And that's going to cover, again, the sexual harassment, discrimination, and unfair termination. So those are big there. Those are two, for examples, if you will, of the sexual harassment component of that. Now, getting into discrimination, you think, again, I'd never discriminate for my employees. Okay, I get it. That's very uncommon. But in your interviewing process, somehow you end up not hiring someone of color or creed or gender, and because you don't have a systematized, if you will, workflow or process in how you hire people, and you don't have a form letter that goes out, you don't make a copy of it, hey, we're just a small law firm, we were looking for, a receptionist. Holy crap, what do you mean we're getting served with a lawsuit? It had nothing to do, of course, with the person's color or creed or beliefs or whatever it is, or age. And the next thing you know, you've got a discrimination lawsuit against you. So there's an example of something that you wouldn't think, because you watching today, hey, I love all people. I'm not against anybody. Well, there's an example of how that could come back to get you. And then the unfair termination is very simply, disgruntled employees, aren't they a beautiful bunch? Being a business owner myself, so I'd love to tell you that I've never had to fire an employee, and if I did that, you'd shut it down right now and say, Carol's a liar, and you'd be right. Of course I've had to fire employees. 9 out of 10 times, it's a very uncomfortable thing. You feel badly, you took a lot of time and effort. We're very workflow oriented here, as I hope you are too, but you take a lot of time and effort, and it just doesn't work out. And you have to have that uncomfortable meeting, and you feel badly for them, but you feel worse for how your business and all the money you've wasted and time, which obviously time is money in the business world, and what have you. That's 9 out of 10. There's 1 out of 10 where you're like relishing the opportunity. Oh, yes, I want to fire this person. And that's the individual who's going to be a problem more often than not. And they come back, and it's your fault, because we live in a society where it's never anyone's fault. It's always the other guy's fault, right? No one takes ownership. No one, you see it with unemployment. That's the junior version of unfair termination, when they go to get unemployment benefits, and they didn't train me nothing, and, can you believe they wanted to make me learn how to speak the right way, and that ain't no good, and this and that. Now, I use those examples not to belittle people, but it's like in a professional environment, you better believe we have the right to share with you exactly how to answer the phones and to use proper grammar. We don't belittle anyone who has maybe not been taught the right way or what have you. Certainly from a lawyer's perspective, you would expect your lawyers who are college educated and then pass the bar to be very grammatically efficient or astute, if you will. But how about the fancy words I'm trying to use here? You like that, don't you? But my point is, you may have support staff who went to a couple years of college or maybe no college at all that just don't speak properly, and that's the first impression, and that's just a small example. But, you know, you look at, again, when you go to an unemployment hearing, and these I speak from personal experience, and we've never lost that. Why? Because we have workflows and systems that systematize everything. They've had every opportunity. But that's it. If they win that unemployment, they can collect unemployment, they may next go for your unfair termination. And again, now you've got a lawsuit. So employer's liability, EPLI, that is, it depends on how many employees you have, what your payroll is, kind of like workers' comp, which will come in the next section of today's class. But what you're looking at on that is very simply, you know, costs can range anywhere between $750 a year up to $5,000. $5,000 is obviously for a huge firm. It's all relative to your revenues and the size of your staff. But again, for that low amount of money, would I recommend that? Yes, I would. And everything I'm recommending is what I have in my office. Because at the end of the day, a law business, like an insurance business, we're very similar in what we do. You all are obviously more educated than I am, and you're obviously smarter than I am. And that's not saying much, because I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I am very bright and astute when it comes to lawyers, okay? That's one thing I understand better than anything I do in the world in a professional capacity is how to protect lawyers properly. That's what I do. I am the Dr. James Andrews, if you're a sports fan, the orthopedic surgeon who revolutionized how athletes would get their arms operated on and their knees. And he's still, Dr. Andrews is still the leading guy, even though he's been at it for a long time, as am I. I've earned those awards, as has Dr. Andrews. That's the one thing I know. But at the end of the day, what you're looking at here is you want to make sure that all of these exposures are protected. And I would never recommend anything to you that I wouldn't have on my own. So it's the old adage. Remember the old, what was it, the Hair Club, I believe it was called? The guy would come on and he would say, I'm not only the president, I'm a member. And then he'd have the picture of him balding and then with a nice crop, you know, and what have you. I think that's extremely important. Certainly, my professional liability is called errors and omissions. Yours is called lawyer's professional liability. But they're the same animal with a different name, if you will. So like a dog, just a different breed. So that's it. That wraps up the section on the Grizzly, Gremlins, and Exclusions of the insurance industry. And that's something you certainly want to pay attention to. And now you're good there. Okay, moving on to workers' compensation. Workers' compensation, again, I addressed that earlier. That's a situation where a lot of law firms I see don't carry it because the exposure is low. Most states, I would check with your state. Texas, for example, does not require it. Other states do. Most states do. Certainly, it is the office class risk for workers' comp is very, it's the lowest rate. What can happen? Again, yes, carpal tunnel, bend over, hurt your back. Someone picks up a box, they hurt their back, whatever. It's very inexpensive. Don't forgo it. By state law, you have to have it. A lot of times lawyers say, really? I didn't even think of it that way. In a state like Ohio, there are 4 states in the country, Ohio, Washington, North Dakota, and Wyoming, that it works through the state. It just, you treat it like a payroll tax, if you will. The rest of the other 46 states, other than Texas, that doesn't require it. I believe there are 2 other states, off the top of my head, I don't know which they are, kind of smaller population states, as I recall. But the other states mandate that you have to have it, and it's run through the insurance industry. That would be yours truly. And again, it's a nickels and dimes type thing. Again, we're talking most law firms in the hundreds of dollars a year and what have you. So that's workers' comp. Workers' comp is what it is. Your employee gets injured, and you know they have injuries, and while they're out, therefore you're not having to pay for them, because if you don't have your workers' comp, again, you're self-insuring. Insurance, remember in the beginning of today's class, transference of risk. So there's workers' comp right there. Okay, moving along. Lawyers cannot be sued, or can they?